Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I thought we'd continue our discussion on the life of Elijah, the prophet. If you remember, Elijah was born in the area of Transjordan, that is on the eastern side of Jordan, and he was called by God to go to speak to Ahab and Jezebel. And he went into the court of Ahab and Jezebel, and he condemned with their apostasy. And he said that I'm going to pray that there's a famine in the land. And so he leaves the court, and Jezebel, of course, and Ahab are after him. They want to destroy him. So the Lord brings him to a place called Kerith. Kerith is in the Transjordan side. And if you remember the story, he's in Kerith, and the ravens feed him, and he's taken care of by the water, and the ravens take care of him. And then the famine hits. And if you remember the book of James, James says the famine lasted for 3.5 years. So he leaves Kerith, and he goes to Zarephath. And he meets the widow of Zarephath, and the widow takes care of him. And pretty soon she runs out of food, but he miraculously takes care of her. He gets an endless supply of food because God is working miracles to him. And if you remember the story, she has a son that dies, and he lays himself on the son, and the son is resurrected. So then God calls him to go to Ahab and confront Ahab. So Elijah goes and he confronts Ahab in front of the whole nation of Israel. Well, not the whole nation, but figuratively speaking, the whole nation of Israel. And they decide to have a contest about this apostasy that's going on. Who is the God of Israel? Is it Baal or is it Yahweh? So they devise a contest. The contest takes place at Mount Carmel. Mount Carmel is the home territory of Baal. That's where they worship him. There's lightning and thunder going on. But they devise the contest like this. They take a bull and you sacrifice it, and whatever God consumes the bull, that will be the God that we worship. So the prophets of Baal, there's 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah, Baal's consort. And they take the altar and they put the bull on the altar and they pray and pray and pray, and they start screaming and yelling at Baal, please come down to Baal and food. And I love Elijah. Elijah looks at him, well, was he going to the bathroom or something? What's wrong with this guy? But, and then so nothing happens. The next day, Elijah builds a moat around the altar, fills it with water, pours water all over the altar, and then God miraculously consumes the altar, consumes what's on the altar, consumes the bull, and God wins the battle. God is now the God of Israel, not Baal. It's a glorious and great victory. And they slay the prophets of Baal, and they slay the prophets of Asherah. And then Ahab rides away in his chariot. He seems to be taking it in pretty well. And then Elijah runs out in front of him, almost like an Olympic runner. He tucks his robe under his belt and runs in front of the chariot. What great strength the man had. But it's like a victory. It's a victory for an Olympic athlete. It's a great time. We finally decided who's going to be the God of Israel. It's going to be the God it's going to be Yahweh. Baal is gone. It's going to be a great time. So let's continue that story. It's found in 1 Kings chapter 19. Actually, I was over in 1 Kings chapter 19. We read about what happens after this glorious event. 1 Kings 19. Okay, 1 Kings 19, verse 1. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went to a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. And he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. And once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there was by his head a cake of bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came again back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up and he ate and drank. So strengthened by the food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and slept the night. Lord, thank you so much for this story about this wonderful man, Lord, as an example to us, Lord. May we learn from the life of Elijah. In the precious name of Jesus. Amen. The USS Abraham Lincoln is headed toward the Persian Gulf, and the military advisors to the president want the president to send 120,000 troops into the area of the Persian Gulf. They feel that the Persians or the Iranians are sabotaging vessels in the Persian Gulf, and it's hanging over our heads that there's going to be a war. That something awful going to happen. 1919, they had the Treaty of Versailles, which ended World War I. World War I was going to be the war that ended all wars. After World War I, there's going to be no more wars. The whole world, literally speaking, or figuratively speaking, the whole world is at war. All wars are going to end. Well, that doesn't happen. World War I leads to World War II. And World War II is a great time, great victory. This is the end. But it doesn't happen. We have the Korean War, then the Vietnam War, and then you have the war in Yugoslavia, then we got the war in Iraq, and the war in Afghanistan. It just never ends. I mean, you get frustrated. This is what's going through the mind of Elijah. It just never ends. I'm running from these people all the time, and I can't get away, and the wars never seem to end. What happens is Ahab goes back and tells Jezebel what's happened, that the prophets of Baal are killed. And the one behind it, of course, is Elijah. So she says, she vows that tomorrow by this time, you're going to be dead. I'm going to kill you. So he panics, he's had enough. So he races down to the south of Judah, to the southern part of Judah, Beersheba. He rushes to Beersheba, and there he tells his servant that to stay here. I'm going on a day's journey. What he's in effect saying when he tells his servant that he's to stay here and he goes off on a day's journey, what he's saying is, I'm giving up the ministry. No more for me. I'm giving up. I'm no longer going to be a prophet of God. And so he finds a broom tree. What I understand, a broom tree is a 12-foot tree, very slender, with a minimum amount of foliage. And he sits under the broom tree and he laments. I'm a failure. I'm just like the country of Israel. I've failed at driving out Baal. I've failed at everything. I'm just terrible, just like everybody else is. And so he's giving up the ministry and just beating himself up. And so an angel appears to him and tells him that he needs something to eat. And he gives him some bread, he gives him some water, and again, Elijah falls asleep. He gets up again, and the angel's back there, and the angel says, what you need to do is journey to the Mount Horeb. Mount Horeb is an ancient name for Sinai. So remember, Sinai is the place that God gave the Ten Commandments to Moses. So he takes a journey. Now the journey between Beersheba and Mount Horeb is about 200 miles. But the angel tells him he's going to take 40 days to do it. 40 days and 40 nights, which is about 5 miles a day, not much at all. But why 40 days and 40 nights? I think it's because, if you remember the story, that the people of Israel were in this very same area. It's the same desert place that the nation of Israel spent 40 years in the desert learning about God. That's what God is trying to teach him in his 40 days and 40 night experience. If you remember Jesus, Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, Jesus spent 40 days and 40 nights in the desert being tempted, again identifying with Israel. So he journeys to Horeb. And when he gets to Horeb, the text says that he finds a cave. In the original language, the word is the cave, which reads some commentators believe that the cave he's talking about is the original cave that Moses lived in when he went to Mount Sinai. The point is that this is one frustrated, upset man. He's a hurting man. But Christianity is filled with a lot of hurting men. Remember the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians that I've come to the point in life where I just want to die. I just can't take life anymore. I figure the man's been shipwrecked 5 times. 3 times he's been beaten with rods. 3 times he's been beaten with whips. He's swept from outside, he's swept from inside. People are out to get him, people are out to kill him. It's this horrible life. That's sometimes the life of a Christian. Life becomes tough for us. Yesterday the guys were out working on the outside of the church and doing all the work. And I tried to do what I could do, but my body's falling apart, it's breaking down. It's part of life. It's just part of life. It's difficult. But we all go through these difficulties. And Wednesday night when we have a prayer meeting, we have this longness of prayer. Tom does a great job of it. There's just so many people that are hurting in this church. So many people are hurting all over the place. It's just one hurting place. God's people are hurting. And when we look around our nation, what's going on in our nation? I saw an article the other day that said that public schools in Minnesota, they're teaching the kids the Quran. There's a Muslim that led the prayer at Congress one time. It's just things are out of control. It's depressing, and you get down on yourself. Sometimes you're evangelism, you talk to people about Christ, and you get no response. Everything falls on dead ears. But what's the point? It's like taking care of your health, eating right, living right. If you fall apart, you die anyway. What's the point of all this? So we get depressed. I feel like the psalmist, Psalm 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? A lot of people think that's David. I don't know if it's David. We really don't know who the psalmist is, but he seems to be a man that's facing death, so he's going to execute him. Matter of fact, that's what Jesus quotes that passage in when he's on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? So we go through all these difficulties in life. We're down, desperate sometimes. So what does God have to say about it? Well, let's pick it up in verse 9. And the word of the Lord came to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant. Broken down your altars. Put your prophets to death with a sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me. The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is going to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. In the wind there was an earthquake. After the wind there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his coat over his head face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. And the voice said, what are you doing here, Elijah? I've been very zealous for the Lord God. He answered, rejected you from the broken down your altars and put your prophets to death with a sword. I am the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me. And the Lord said, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king of Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Mahola, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death who will escape the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death anyone who escaped the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserved 7,000 men, all of Israel, whose knees did not bow to battle, and whose mouths did not kiss them. So Elijah went from there, found Elisha, son of Jacob, and he was plowing with 12 yoke oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my mother and father goodbye, he said, and then I will come back with you. Go back, Elijah said, what have I done to you? So Elisha left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen and slaughtered them. He burned the plowing equipment to the cook. The meat, and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah, and he was attended. Remember the story about Peter? Jesus had told his disciples to go across the Sea of Galilee, and after they left, a short time after, he went out and found him. And he was walking on the water, and the disciples saw him walking on the water, and Peter became transpired. Oh, he's walking on water. Lord, bid me that I can do that too. So Jesus says, come on, walk on the water. So Peter gets out of the boat and starts walking on the water. Imagine that, a man walking on water. And all of a sudden he becomes terrified by the circumstances. He looks out, he sees the raging wind, he sees the rough waters. He becomes terrified and falls, and Jesus has to save him. This is the trouble with Elijah. He takes his eyes off the Lord. As long as Peter had his eyes on the Lord, he was all right. And as long as Elijah had his eyes on the Lord, he was all right. God took care of him when he was at Tisra. God took care of him when he was at Mount Carmel. He took care of him when he was in Zarephath. God was taking care of him all the time. When he takes his eyes off God, then he becomes fearful, So God is building his confidence. He says, go to the mountain. Goes on top of the mountain. And all of a sudden, there's great winds so stark that the mountain's being torn apart. And it must have been a terrifying sight. But the text says that God was not in the wind. And then he sees it, and he sees an earthquake. Earthquake's ripping the whole place apart. But God was not in the earthquake. Then he sees a great fire. He was terrified by the fire. The text says God was not in the fire. What he means by that is simply this. God is not showing judgment. God is encouragement. God is not showing judgment to his prophet. He loves his prophet and he's showing encouragement to him. Furthermore, he gives him simple tasks. Just go anoint Jehu, king over the southern kingdom, anoint Hazael, king over Aram, which is Syria, and then anoint Elisha as a successor to you. So he anoints Elisha, and it says that there's 7,000 men that do not bow their knee to Baal. In other words, I've got 7,000 people that are on your side. And he grabs Elisha, and Elisha, he becomes a mentor to Elisha. Elisha says, I need to go back home and say goodbye to my family. And I love what Elisha says. What did I do to you? What have I done to you? It's a Hebrew idiom. It means knock yourself out and do what you want to do. But he's got a friend in Elisha. He's got a man he's going to mentor. And what God is saying to Elijah is simply this: he's being gentle with him. God is gentle with his people. Sometimes we're not so gentle with other Christians. Fyodor Dostoevsky, the great Russian novelist, once said that Christians are the only army in the world that can shoot their wounded. We need to be sensitive to people that go through difficult problems. In the first book of Corinthians, Paul talks about a man that falls into sexual immorality. He says to the church that abandon this man to Satan, that he might destroy his flesh. So they abandon Satan. In 2 Corinthians, he talks about this man recovering. He's changed his mind, he's changed his heart, he's repented. Paul says to welcome him back to be kind and loving toward him. And we find people that are falling into sin, we need to be comforting them and loving them, and not be judgmental to them, but always be open and honest and loving them. I was reading the Daily Bread this morning, and they were talking about crooked steeples on churches today. People don't want any imperfections in the church, and we're all kind of terrified of that. But God uses our imperfections. Paul said, according to my flesh, God is magnified through his weakness. God loves us, and we need to show that love to other people. We need to be more open and honest with our feelings and encouraging and loving to people that are struggling with their faith and going through difficulties. I love the story that Chuck Swindoll tells. It's about a veteran who's in the VA hospital, and he's been in there for months. He's a very sick man. And during those months that he was in confinement, he made a wooden truck for his son. One day his son came to visit him, and he was 5 floors above the little boy, but the little boy couldn't go up and see him because the little boy wasn't allowed in the room. So he's frantically waving to the boy, and finally he sends the truck down with one of the attendants. The boy opens up the truck, and he sees this wooden truck that his daddy made him. His eyes get as big as saucers, and he hugs the attendant and thanks him for it. He says, no, that wasn't me. Look up there, that's your father made that. His father's frantically waving to him. The little boy looks up and says, thank you so much for the truck, Daddy. I love you. Come home soon. It's a picture of our great God who loves us. Loves us enough, even though sometimes we make mistakes and do things. He loves us in spite of that. And we're to love each other too. We're to love each other, take each other in, and comfort each other, even though we can sense, even though we're all struggling with various difficulties in life. Let's pray. Our Father, we thank you so much for your grace and your love. We thank you for your grace. We thank you, Lord, you forgive our sins and that you're there. No matter what happens, no matter what we do, Lord, you love us. May we be a church that wraps our arms around people that are struggling and hurting. We would comfort each other, Lord. Bless our church in Jesus' name. Amen. So, comments or prayer requests?